Okay, so we're in a bit of a dilemma. We have three new candidates that have arisen in our 2024 presidential election. The first one is a war hero, the second is a philosopher, and the third is a businessman. And each and every single one of these people think they are more than qualified to be running for the presidential election and to be selected as the ideal candidate. The war hero thinks they're qualified because of their keen sense of war and peace that would help keep America safe in global conflict. The philosopher thinks that they're qualified because of their understanding of the nature of reality, which has given them access to the eternal truths and underlying all human and natural existence. And the businessman thinks they're more than qualified because they turned around their struggling business and their post-annual profits for several years running and their keen market sense. Each and every single one of these would definitely work, especially being at the President of the United States, because they all qualify, especially in the time that we have. A war hero, while we're in a global conflict with third world countries, it would definitely nice to have someone keeping us safe and someone that has their keen understanding of war. The businessman, especially being in this time of inflation, not to mention America's in trillions of dollars of debt, it would be great to have someone like that leading our country. And in the philosopher, their pursuit of knowledge alone qualifies them to be the president because of their understanding and their objective ability to not speak through opinion, but through their objective knowledge and understand what knowledge is itself. Who do you choose? That is the main question. And according to the Republic, who would Socrates choose? The main answer, the beginning answer, the thesis would be Socrates would choose the philosopher. Period, point blank. He would not choose a businessman, and he would not choose the war hero. But why? To understand why, you first have to understand Socrates' mindset. Socrates' mindset is a mindset of who's going to bring you justice. And it was understanding what justice is. And the way he got there was through having conversations with multiple characters in the Republic, mainly Plato, right? So let's take you through the journey. Socrates, to answer this question, has a journey of justice, then his political critique, and then answering why the philosopher is the main guy. First, he has his early definitions. We see justice as giving people what they're due, justice as the interest of the stronger, and justice as an art of theft. Sorry about that. Right? These are his early definitions because he doesn't really have this full understanding yet. But as he continues to go on, as he continues to discover and unpack what justice is, the question changes from what is justice to why justice. Why would someone want to be just? Why would someone want to be just in an unjust world? Just people don't get ahead. Unjust people do. They have no problem cutting corners. They have no problem doing what's needed to be done, just or not, to get ahead. So why would someone want to do that? And as he continues throughout his story, throughout this book, throughout this exploration of justice, he gets an answer to that as well. When he arrives at this question of why justice, we get a new analogy. It's the analogy of the soul and the city. The city is called Caligulus, and they're creating a whole new city from start to finish. And you have your first political problem the moment you have your guardians. Right? The guardians are the first things. They're protectors. They're like the military in modern day times. But in reality, they're just the guardians, right? The guardians, what happens when the guardians turn against you? And that is the first political issue. How do you keep them in check? They're like wild dogs, unless you keep them in check. It goes from being wild dogs to well-bred dogs. And that is the answer to that question of how do you control them? You have to make them well-bred dogs. Well-bred dogs are cuddly to you, but they attack any opposition. They attack the enemy, people that you want them to attack, and they obey. But how do you have well-bred dogs? It's through education. And how do you get education? It's through a noble lie. A noble lie would be like telling the stories of Achilles. There are two different ways to tell it. There are ways to tell him as a selfish man, as a man who only fought to have his name last through the ages, which he was inherently successful in, or tell the stories of Achilles as the great war hero, as the guy who him and his myrmidons of 50 men took the beaches of Troy by themselves, who it took them to breach the walls of Troy. Stories like that of Achilles persevering, of Achilles showing his great, immense leadership in battle, of him being ahead of the game. It's telling that heroic story to motivate the guardians. That would be kind of like an example of a noble lie. And here's the second aspect of a lie. Yes, you have your well-bred dogs, right? But then you have to worry about everyone else in your population. How do you know who's who? How do you know what you're supposed to do? How do you know where you fall? Because you have to have someone leading it. Otherwise, what separates us from the animals? There needs to be someone at the top. But how do you decide who rules? So the noble lie would be about the soul stones, the stones. So you have your gold stone, you have your silver stone, and you have your brass and your iron stone, right? The gold stones are the rulers, the silver stones are the auxiliaries, like your guardians, and your brass are like your producers, like your everyday jobs. It's not to say they're lower than anyone else, it's just to say their skill set is set to that, it's set to, that job or wherever they fall in place. As you move up in that triangle, it's an accumulation though. And I think this is where the genius begins, and this is where you kind of see why the philosopher is at the top, right? He broke it down into almost like a hierarchy in the sense of you have your iron, your brass, they align more with the appetite. Your appetite is your lack of your ability to control your emotions. Just because you feel it, you do it, right? Then you have your silver, which is more your spiritedness, save your country, like the guardians, right? That's why they're up there. Then you have your reason. Now, who has the reason? How do you have reason without knowledge? Knowledge and being in the pursuit of knowledge is what creates that reason. And this is where your philosopher kind of comes in, because your philosophers, they're not sophists that pretend to understand and pretend to know. They have a true, philosophers seek truth. They know truth. And they spread the amount of truth that we can handle. And it's seen through Plato's allegory of the cave, where the guys are attached and they're facing a wall and they can only see shadows. And they're in a dark cave. One of them gets released and goes into the world, sees the sun, sees life, sees truth. And when they come back, if he were to tell that truth, portray that truth, he'd get killed. He would be laughed at. He would be mocked. So he tells them a little bits that they can handle. And that is just a depiction of the knowledge that the philosophers hold, because they go out and they tell. So to illustrate kind of how the hierarchy works, I have a highlighter, right? The auxiliaries would have one. And this is kind of how they move on the pole, right? Then these are no, my bad. Oh my God, producers. The producers have one. The auxiliaries have two. And then your rulers have all three. These are your rulers. It's an accumulation of everything. How do you know you're born? It's because you show the qualities that a ruler would have, but your ruler should be able to do everything else. And that's what it does. It's an aspect of having that it's that holistic point of view, right? And this is kind of, so after Socrates defines what justice is, he then moves on to the critique of the political systems, and he says how like the political systems of this time, like democracy, oligarchy, and the tyranny and the aristocracy, these forms of government fail to prioritize wisdom and virtue and truth. And that's what the philosophers hold, and that adds to the societal decay and these political systems, right? So when you have a philosopher that is in constant pursuit of that, they will uphold the things that are important, right? So in a summation, to kind of have the set understanding of why Socrates would choose that, right? You have, I have him in right here. Okay, so your war hero, Socrates will appreciate the war hero, but his military expertise and his keen war sense alone won't be enough to lead. They won't meet the criteria because it's just a keen sense of war, which is why they fall in the second one. And the businessman right? They're more concerned with the material realm. Anything, the monetary value, the more tangible things, they have a great understanding, and they have a good understanding, but they don't have the deep understanding of justice, which is a necessity for the ruler. The philosophers, they are in that constant pursuit of knowledge. They have a deep understanding of justice, and that's why they're qualified to lead. It is because their deep understanding of justice, and that's why Socrates would choose them. Now, if I were to take a position, if I were to agree or disagree, I would agree with Socrates and saying that philosophers should rule. And here's why. A good parallel I like to make would be in my religion, Christianity, right? We have God, and it's the Trinity, and you have Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit, right? Jesus was the only perfect person to ever walk this earth. We firmly believe he was real. There's historical fact to back it up, but we firmly believe he was real. He walked this earth. He did it perfectly, free of sin. He is the model of how you should live. Humans are born sinners, but we're made in the image of Jesus, and our goal is to be like him. We'll never be perfect, but it is our goal to be like him, right? So what we practice is this art of sanctification, and it is the commitment that although we know we're going to mess up, that although we know we may not know everything, we may not make every right decision, that art of sanctification, of doing the best we can every single day, that is the art of sanctification. It's kind of how I see the philosophers. They already know that there are the unknowables, but they understand of how much they don't know, and they are in constant pursuit of this knowledge, of this truth, of this justice. And that is why I feel that the philosophers would be the ones that should rule and should be the ideal candidate for the presidential 2024 election. Yes, I know I didn't use direct quotes, but I paraphrased and I kind of grabbed the chunks of it. I just wanted to make that clear. Like the direct quotes, it's more of like a paraphrasation thing. Sorry. Yeah.